Hello everyone, and welcome back to another voiced step-by-step tutorial video on one of my own personal original artworks. This one here is called Wishing, and we're going to be playing with lots of fun, vibrant colors here. It's going to be quite moody. It's going to feature a lot of blues. Even the greens are kind of in that blue tone, and then of course we're going to contrast it with a very, you could say, contrasting color, okay, which will be the red. This is going to be a really fun one to do. I really personally like these kind of scenes, especially with the darker mood, and you can get away with like playing around with the glowing lights and just making the whole scene look a lot more interesting. Okay, so as usual, this will be a little bit sped up because it's a very long video process, but I will be covering all the main points behind it, and you'll be able to see exactly how this was created from start to finish, much like all our other voiced step-by-step videos. Okay, so let's get straight into it, guys. Okay, so as you can see, during the recording of this process, I had a bit of a mood palette on the top left corner as usual, but you can tell that I kind of stray away from this. And like I always say, these color palettes are a good starting point to start off with, but not necessarily something you can, you need to follow through on. If you feel like you've got a better color to work with, then by all means go with that. It's all about the feeling, right? So from the blank canvas, we're going to start off with a gradient as usual, and it's going to be a dark blue, a medium darkish blue to a lighter blue, but it's going to be a very vibrant saturated blue. Okay, now with the darker blue, we're going to go in and create a horizon line and a ground plane right across the scene from the almost the mid point. And I'm just going to start blocking in and sketching in some shapes just to get some ideas going. I'm not exactly sure what's in mind. I've got at the moment, it's kind of just going in, sketching, having fun, and seeing what happens. That's the fun part, right? Okay, so I'm just going in and just playing around with big to small shape and edge variations, and just seeing what we can come up with. Now here I'm going to start, I'm going to add a new layer on top and start playing around with the lighting details, trying to just find some textures, find shapes once again, because sometimes a flat shape can only get you so far. Sometimes you need to add in that lighting details or those textures to try to get more visualization on the form as a 3D form, not just a flat shape. Like, shapes are great, but sometimes you need to push it further just to really realize on what you're creating here, what you're working with. Does that make sense? And I find myself noticing once I start adding in those details and those lighting textures, I start to realize, oh, this shape might actually work better with less, or it might actually work better with more. And then you start playing with the shape again. And you can see here I'm playing around with all sorts of variations of size, right? I personally find this to be one of the, I'd probably say there's a lot, one of the most fun parts for me. It's really therapeutic, just really going in there and just blobbing in shapes with no preconceived ideas. There's no pressure other than the fact that I'm recording, but there's no pressure on the kind of goal here, which is great. And I think that really allows the creative brains and juices to flow more freely. So you can tell here I'm starting to experiment with sharper shapes. So before it was really blocky, very thick, strong, solid shapes, but now we're going for the more pointy shapes, just to really see what might work better. Now I'm going to try and mix around with the old texture layer, but push and pull, adding, erasing, and you can tell I'm playing with some much thinner lines here. And just with these thin lines, you can already see the composition's been pushed back a lot more, especially with the shapes being really thinner and sharper. They feel and look smaller, like out in the distance. So just playing around, and at some point, much like in my usual processes, I will come up with something that I really like, and I will stick with that and then move on forward with that idea. Now here I'm starting to feel something, but obviously something's still not right. So I'm still trying to work on it. Do I keep to those sharp shapes? Do I go back to the solid shapes I had in the early stages? It's time to make a decision, guys. But I'm really loving the mood and feel of how it's looking so far, such as the very vibrant, glowing blue background in the sky there, contrasting with the super vibrant reds here. I really love these kind of palettes and these moods. But that's just me personally. I think a lot of people, prefer the more muted, natural colors. That's really, really cool as well. But I think these kind of colours always speak to me, and I think you guys, if you followed me for a long time, you would know that based on my artworks. So you can see it's starting to become a hybrid of the sharp shapes and the solid flat shapes. So it's starting to become a bit of a blend between the two. As you can see, I've moved on to the ground plane here to try and figure out what's going on around this area. So at this point, I'm fairly happy with those mountains out in the back there. And I'm just going to quickly color pick from that lightest blue in the sky and make it a little bit lighter so it pops. And I'm just going to sketch in some clouds, which will obviously be reworked later on. But for now, it's just to become a placeholder and just to remind myself that this is what's going to be here later. I'm just playing around, experimenting with the mid ground here, the ground plane. Perhaps it could look more interesting tilted, but something to play around with. Maybe I just get rid of it as a whole and have it as more of a landscape based, really high up in the atmosphere here. So we've got lots, maybe clouds just fading out the lower bit of the mountains. to really give that atmospheric feel that it's really high up. Now I'm looking at defining the edges a little bit more. Really try and solidify that shape here. So then moving forward, it'll be a lot more of a comfortable process. So obviously in my early processes of my artworks, I try to keep everything really loose. But if I have ideas on how I can refine it and allows me to be super happy with what the shape looks like early on, then that's even better. But not all the time it happens. But if you do have that feeling of knowing what you kind of want, get right into it and add it in and worry about it. You don't have to worry about it later. So really playing with the small to medium to big shapes, even in the details here. Whether it be the blocking shape or the details, it's really good to have those variations in there, just so it keeps it from looking too similar. Now I'm adding that ground plane back in, but perhaps at this point I want to go with more of a green feel. Just to break up from all the blues and the reds. Perhaps it might just be a hill. So obviously a lot of people already know based on this artwork that it's going to end up being a portrait orientation artwork. So this is a really cool process to watch, to how I actually started this off as a landscape. And then as I kept working on it, it started turning into a portrait orientation artwork. So it's all part of the process, whatever feels better, whatever suits the environment a lot more and the composition. So with reflections here, for those who are new here and haven't seen other videos of how this is achieved, you essentially just duplicate everything on top of the water plane, and then you flatten it into one layer, then you flip it vertically, and you can clip it as a clipping mask layer onto the water, blocking water, the water block there, that solid shape, and then it will create a really accurate and basically an accurate reflection of the scene that's above the water. Okay, now time to add a little bit more grass into the midground here. Now the hill's obviously not going to be as big as the one in our foreground because we're trying to capture that distance here, so it's going to be a little bit flatter, but it's still going to somewhat keep to similar elements to the hills just to keep some consistency going forward. Now get some highlights in there. And as you can see here, I'm doing some blends. Once I added in that green, it was a little bit too green. So I had to blend in some of that blue into it to create its own new color. So now it's got that bit of a slight blue tint to it. Get that fog back in there. Now we'll get some shadows, just some darker areas of the water, just so it lands a little bit better. Or else it's just going to feel like it's floating on the water. So it's really important to add those little shadows in. So at this point I found that the main mountain that we had early on was a little bit too dark, so you can tell that I was just adding in some light blues on there just to really push it out a little bit more. And it creates that value separation between the hill and the mountain. So it doesn't feel like it's clashing. Okay, now I'm just going to go into the clouds here and I'm going to go for a really, really light yellow and just add in a bit of glow into the left side here. Just adding a touch of yellow or maybe orange, just to create more of a more richer lighting effect to the scene here. Just try to find a nice balance between the blue in the cloud and the new yellow tint that you're adding in. Just create a nice balance. I'm going to add a bit of an extension from that hill there on top of the water, just to give some, just to kind of break up that horizon line we've got in the top edge of that water, but also to create some sort of continuation of the hill coming out closer towards us. And this is where I'm starting to play with the canvas a little bit and playing around with the cropping, which means if I turn it vertical, I have to try and enlarge everything else as well, upwards, just to fill in all that space. And I'm going to move things around a little bit. And obviously we're losing a lot of the information that we had from when it was a landscape, so to try and make up for that into a vertical. Gonna be rejigging things around. try to do a bit of a crop to see if the information is all within that square there. I just use that as a way to kind of just have a look at where a lot of my important information will be. So you can think I'm just reusing the same elements that I had before I cropped it, and I've just kind of rejigged and moved things around a little bit, but it's still kind of the same. It's pretty much the same elements. Okay. And I'm just doing that reflection thing I told you about. We just duplicate everything and flip it vertically and just clip it onto that water. You can add a vertical blur to it, just to fog it out, so it doesn't become too, doesn't combat too much with the actual environment scene. Now I'm going to use one of my texture brushes to just create some water textures onto the water there. I'm going to be distorting and playing around with the shape itself and the details. And we don't want it to be too light in the foreground here, so I'm just going to lock the layer and darken it a little bit. Because I want the closer foreground area to be darker. Just to create some sort of a slight vignette feel. So just playing around with the smaller details in that lighting for the mountain there. Okay, now I'm going to move on and I'm going to add a slightly bigger tree on top of those hills there, and then I'll follow that up with some smaller trees surrounding it. Just going to draw the trunks first. This is going to really help me figure out the structure of the tree and what direction it might be flowing in. And I'll just paint in the bushes, the leaves and stuff at the top. Try to figure out a nice shape for that as well. Now usually after I'm happy with the placement and the size and the scale of the tree here, I'll then just use my triangle texture brush and just paint in some of those light details with a lighter green. And then I'll do the details, really rough and loose details for the trunk here. And we should be good to go. Just going to add a little bit more yellow into the hill, just so it really stands out and pops. Now I'm trying to figure out if I want more trees, maybe up in the foreground here, a little bit closer, some bigger ones. But I'm just going to go in with a darker blue, just right in front of that mid-ground fogging, but also behind that big tree there, and just paint in some slightly smaller trees. This will help support the bigger tree there, and it'll help populate the scene a little bit more and make it look more like it belongs in nature. Now I'm going to go in with a even smaller brush here. You can get away with using a triangle brush or any other texture brush and just create some of those lighter details for the trees. You can get away with keeping this real loose. It's not something we're going to be able to see if we're focusing on the whole environment. So just keep it real rough and loose. Alright, now in front of that fog layer in the midground there, I'm going to just paint in some more visible and detailed kind of cloud or fog textures. Just so it has a little bit more form and shape to it. But the fog layer with using that soft airbrush is still going to remain, but it might drop the opacity a little bit between the two. Now I'm just going back to that big mountain there and start adding in some midtones. So I'm just using a color that's kind of in between a mix of that bright red in the lighting and that dark blue in the shadows. So just thinking about the direction of where your mountain, how your mountain's sitting, how your object's sitting, and you'll be able to know which direction you can kind of create these mid-tone details in. Okay, now it's time to add in a sketch of a character. Like I always say, characters play a big part in storytelling, and they also work really well as a human scale to give comparison between the size of an average person versus the environment itself. So if you really want to exaggerate it, just make your little person really small, almost like a stick figure. And your environment will look big and grand if all your other values are working alongside it as well. Now with my characters for the clothing, I tend to really enjoy using colors that's already existing in the piece. So in this case, because the reds are quite a standout color, I'm going to have that for the clothes for the character there. Probably could get away with using a light blue or a vibrant blue. But yeah, you can just play around with that. Okay, now at the back there, I'm just adding in another series of mountains just to fill some space in and also to make the environment look more spanning, like it's spanning out into the distance. Then I'm going to fog it out down the bottom there. Use the same lighting that you've got in the sky background there, and you can't go wrong with that. If you're going to add details into your distant mountains, make sure that the reds or highlight details that you're using are lighter than what you have in front of it, or else it's going to create big problems in terms of values and it's going to clash. So I'm just going to fade that out now, just so it's a separate red from the one we've got in the mountain in front of it. Okay, we're going to move back to the foreground here and just put a little bit more work into this area. See what we can do. Now we could add some rocks into the water here. Maybe if you really wanted to showcase the reflection, and maybe that's the kind of a big storytelling in your piece, perhaps you could leave the water area clear of any of these objects. But I want to fill some of that space up, so adding rocks is a great way to do that. So in terms of what color could you use for the rocks, well, you've already got the recipe already there. You've already got rocks that exists in this piece. You can just reuse the same colors and reuse the same lighting texture colors, but just make them smaller, and you'll be good to go. You can see I'm color picking from the existing rock structures and mountains that I've got, and I'm just reusing the colors and painting in. And it's going to help create consistency. So if I was to all of a sudden change the color of the rocks here, it might just look a little bit out of place. Maybe I could get away with using some sort of grey blue, a light grey blue. Or maybe, like I said, it will stand out too much in comparison to the rest of the elements in the scene. Now don't forget about the mid-tone for this rock structure up close as well, like what we did with the big mountain out far. So keep that going as well throughout the piece, keep it consistent. Maybe I could add some grass on top of these mountains here. It'll help break up that line, and it'll also create even a little bit more of a nature feel to the rest of the environment. It works, you know, so it feels right. It's really subtle though, just really small details. Some people might even miss it upon first glance, which is fine. That's the point of these, you know, third level, fourth level details. Alright, now it's time for me to go back and work on the clouds a little bit more. This will be pretty much the refinement stage. So every time I'm revisiting these older bits that I worked on early on, it's going to be refinements and detailing and trying to finalize it essentially. So as you saw before, I played around with the clouds, whether I wanted to add lighting details into it or shadows. Didn't feel like it needed it, so I ended up back to how it was, to just being simple gradient fades between the yellow and the light blue. So we're going to keep with that. And now, because the sky is quite empty at the back, at the top area there, I'm just going to go in and paint in some really, really faint textures, and I'll add a blur onto it. So it just feels like it's there. It's not something that's too eye-catching. It doesn't need to be. It's just going to be some rough textures that's going to fill in some of that space to keep it from being a perfect, unnatural gradient. I mean, obviously in real life you do have that very perfect gradient, but there's always going to be some sort of texture. So I'm essentially just trying to replicate that. Now I'm just revisiting here and there, bouncing between places that I feel like needs more refinement. So I'll go in and just work on bits here and there until I'm happy with the overall piece and all the elements inside it. Right, so after all the cleanup, here comes one of the final things that I'll do just to finish it off. It's to add in the little grass details, which I'll be painting in manually, stroke by stroke. Mainly just on the hills area, and also it will be also on the foreground hill, and then that will be pretty much it. We're pretty much there, guys. So remember, because these hills here are further out, I'm going to make sure that my details are smaller as well. Especially when I start working on the foreground area, the grass details on the foreground is going to be much larger. So that's going to be a bit of a good comparison for the eyes to tell that, oh, that's much smaller out there, then it's definitely further away. Because the one we've got here in the foreground, which is what we see in the immediate distance, it's much bigger. So it's visual comparisons to give clues. Okay, I'm doing the whole thing where I'm duplicating the rocks, and then I'm flipping it vertically, and then adding a blur onto it and dropping the opacity and stuff, and then I'll start rearranging things so it sits right underneath where it's meant to be as a reflection. Right. And I'm going to fog some of it out so we can lose some of that detail, because it was quite strong. Okay, now to the foreground here, we'll do what we did with the hills and just add in the grass details, just a little bit bigger, but essentially the exact same process where I'm just painting it in stroke by stroke manually. I do have grass brushes, but I like the feel of being able to control the direction of each stroke. So, you know, despite having grass brushes, I still like to create these things by hand, manually. And that's really therapeutic. I just kind of just mindlessly, or kind of semi-mindlessly, drawing in the spiky grass details, which is great. Yeah. You know, I did enough thinking in the early stages of trying to figure out my composition. Let me just relax and paint some brush strokes. Alright, now for one of the final things, just add in some birds, which I have a bird brush in my Essential Brush Pack. Just kind of stamp it in, play around with the jig, rejig the size if you want, distort it if you want. And yeah, just create some natural dispersion between the birds, because the stamp, you know, might not create the shape of the formation of birds that's flying that you want. So maybe you could just go in and select little areas and move them about, and that's totally fine. That's what it's for. The stamp's just the starting point. It's just to get that information onto the canvas, and you can start altering it from there. Alright guys, now here we are. Here is the finished artwork. Now, this artwork was sped up a bit, but the total working hours for this piece was about 3 to 4 hours. But as you can see there, whether it was sped up or not, you're able to see the exact steps that was involved in creating this piece. If you're really wanting to see how I create my brush strokes and draw and all that in real time. You can find all of that in my exclusive monthly voted tutorial videos, the lessons, and that's all in real time, so you can watch how I do things there. But in a general sense, it's for these kind of videos, it's more about the overall steps and decisions that I've made to get from the start to the finish. Okay, so I hope you guys really enjoyed this one. I hope there was some points in here that could inspire you to play around with your own vibrant color palettes and contrasting colors, because I definitely had a lot of fun doing this piece using these colors, and I'm definitely going to save this color palette and probably use it again sometime in the future. It's got a really ethereal, I don't know how to say it, kind of feel to the artwork, and I really love that. Alright, so we'll stop right here for this one, guys. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you back in the next video.